If you have transmission difficulties, whether video or audio, log out, log back in using the same info, and we will do the same. Today for presenters, we have Mr. Joe Labrie. He is a Regional Compliance Officer with the Inspection Services Unit, or ISU. We have Monica Colosi. She is a Compliance Officer here at OSHPD with the ISU unit. And we will also have the rest of the ISU team in the background answering questions as you type them in. But before we get to the presentation, Joe, would you like to make a brief announcement?
Yeah, thanks, Cesar. Appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here with us. Hopefully, you'll find today's presentation informative. And I think it's great that we're all keeping our head in the game as far as it relates to healthcare construction and how can we be most effective in the duties we have. But I wanted to jump in and just invite any of you who are looking for possible future changes in your career to consider OSHPD. OSHPD's ISU, Inspection Services Unit. We're looking for compliance officers. And there's other areas that within the field, Facilities Development Division that are looking for folks. If you have any interest at all in joining us, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised at what a wonderful place it is to work. So I put that out there for your consideration. Cesar, that was all I wanted to announce. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that great announcement. So, Monica, if you're there, the presentation is all yours.
Thank you, Cesar, and good afternoon to everybody. So today we're going to talk about DPOR responsibilities. And let's see if the computer cooperates. Perfect. Now, these slides might look very confusing. So let's go slowly, step by step. DPOR, what DPOR means? DPOR is Design Professional of Record. The definition on the CBC 200 says for registered design professional in responsible charge as a registered design professional engaged by the owner or the owner's authorized agent to review and coordinate certain aspects of the project as determined by the building official by compatibility with the design of the building or structure, including submittal documents prepared by others, deferred submittals document, and faith submittal documents. But what about paperwork? What about OSHPD? For what is the DPOR responsible and where to look for a list? On OSHPD website, there is a list about the document required to be submitted, listed at the specific phase of the project to do, as the website describes. And you can see here to the left in blue the link for the part of the OSHPD website. Of course, if you are confused, you can always reach into OSHPD for clarification. Design Professional Records needs to coordinate with multiple entities for a project. The DPOR is the one that knows the project, the one that knows the design. The bigger the project is, the more complex the project is, the more people the DPOR needs to coordinate with. You see here in the overall to the right who these entities are. And it might feel overwhelming, but by going step by step, it is less stressful.
You also notice that there's a lot of folks, as Monica said, around that center diamond, and that each person in that circle has a certain responsibility for duties and responsibilities. The DPOR at the center and also the alternates and the delegates are the only entities that can give direction to the field.
Depending on the delivery of the project, the general contractor can be involved from the beginning or not of the project, depending on the project delivery. And this is why you see here on this slide the light blue for the contractor. But the coordination of the design, the project during the design phase and construction needs to happen with all the designers and vendors for medical equipment if it's part of the scope, and medical equipment consultant, which could be from outside or in the design firm. But no matter how the entities come from, the coordination needs to happen, and the sooner, the better.
And, in addition to all of what Monica just mentioned, designers need to take seriously the field work required prior to doing the design work. Get out into the field, verify existing conditions, Yeah, sure. Look at construction drawings that are existing, but going to the field and finding what really was built and is existing would be an invaluable source and tool for the rest of the design.
Now, what about OSHPD? DPOR should not feel shy in front of OSHPD. DPOR, if it has doubt on the design, a code requirement doubt, after studying the specific situation, call OSHPD for confirmation, for clarification. Have a conversation with OSHPD. When a project gets OSHPD comments and the back check is in process, don't avoid the comments. You need to go one by one. And again, if you are not sure about the comment, contact OSHPD for clarification. So what we want to basically highlight on this slide, is to be with the code compliance for your project. Know the code. If there is a doubt, again, contact OSHPD, communicate with OSHPD, study the project, and think for multiple options. If there is an obstacle during the design, think about options, and then talk to OSHPD.
Remember also that it's there's two levels of involvement for the designers, and I think it sometimes, speaking from experience, it sometimes gets forgotten that we as designers have responsibilities once the project's under construction. So remember that there's plan review responsibilities and design that is in code compliance, but there's also field responsibilities for the management of certain aspects of the construction during while the project's being built out. And that, it's key. That one of the things that I think is important is remember that designers, when they come to OSHPD for, ideas, or I should say for approvals, be prepared. Come to meetings with answers already prepared and thought through. Use critical thinking. Don't get caught into the cut and paste trap that is prolific in our industry right now. Use the critical thinking, apply details that work for your project and the specific conditions of your project.
So now what about the owner? The DPOR is going to provide the project. Why? Because the owner hired the DPOR or is the general contractor in case it's the design build. But bottom line, the DPOR needs to be sure the project meets the owner's request, the owner's intent. If something in the project needs to change, is the owner to authorize. Coordination with the owner is very important. The owner needs to know the status of the project for whatever situation requires owner's attention. So the owner needs to have the DPOR coordination for the scope of work, progress of the project, authorization process for a change.
It's very important, Monica, as you said, that connection between the owner and the design professional of record to make sure the project is being scoped, designed, and built the way the owner wants it. He ends up getting exactly what he bought. That's ultimately what we're all hoping for.
So now, one very important meeting, the very first one, when everybody meets maybe for the first time all together, is the pre-construction meeting, is the kickoff meeting. Everybody's there and the coordination begins. But who organizes it? Who takes notes? The CAC 7-141A says that the administration of the work of construction should be under the DPOR. Therefore, providing the agenda, taking notes is DPOR responsibility.
That means that includes, regular interaction, conversations, regular meetings, so on and so forth, led by the designer to make sure the pieces of the puzzle are all put and arranged in the appropriate locations.
We said so many things so far during the slides, so the DPOR might feel overwhelmed. But in case that is the case, don't forget that there are delegates. There are alternates. Delegates are architect or engineer with the authority passed on from the DPOR. And the alternate is the architect or engineer with shared authority from the DPOR or delegate.
It's important to remember that each of these entities, the DPOR, the delegates, and the alternates, need to apply reasonable diligence to obtain their personal knowledge about the project. That can be through the reporting of others. That could be through field site visits. That could be through the review of documentation and IOR, special inspectors, and so on, reports, observation reports by field representatives within their own staff. So stay close to the project during construction.
And so together there are DPOR, delegates, alternates. It's a teamwork. One thing important that you can see on the bottom of this slide is the alternate cannot have another alternate. But other than that, it's a teamwork, DPOR, delegate, and alternate.
Remember those entities, those three that Monica just mentioned, those are the ones with signing authority. So signing documents when it's in the field, the project's in the field being built, they're the ones with the signing authority. Others can represent the designers, the alternates, and the delegates. However, they're reporting back to the responsible professionals for the information so that they can obtain their personal knowledge in a reasonable manner.
So now let's split in the overall, in a bigger picture, the project in three big phases: the prior construction, the during construction, and in the end. Prior to construction, the basic DPOR responsibilities are about coordination in order to prepare the design for the project and submit to OSHPD. Of course, do not forget the TIO, which we presented in several webinars, and we might continue in the future, and it needs to be submitted with the submittal of the project to OSHPD. Once the project is approved, DPOR needs to share the approved construction document to the team. It could happen during the plan review that the project is approved with comments. So what happens to these comments? These comments need to be cleared up, and they are listed until they are cleared up into the OIL, which is the outstanding item list. The OIL is listed in the TIO in the section F. We will talk about the OIL list later in the next slides, but back to the prior of the construction. The kickoff meeting is very important. The design professional record coordinates and establishes milestones with the rest of the team. Those milestones are also indicated into the TIO, which it is managed by the DPOR.
Remember also that the TIO is approved one time and it's approved in the field. Do not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, I had plan review already, look at the TIO. Remember, keep in mind that TIO has to be approved by the field staff. And there's a lot of work that happens after plan review that goes beyond what the plan review staff is looking at. And that has to do with identifying special inspectors, the approved agencies, the inspector of record. It goes into identifying a whole lot of information like milestones and sample reports and so on and so forth. So don't underestimate the importance of TIO fully developed and echoing what Monica already mentioned about the outstanding items list, the OILs list. Sooner you jump on that, as soon as you make sure start knocking those things down, the better your closeout process is going to look when you're ready to be done with this project.
So during construction, what happens? The DPOR needs to manage the material change and non-material change log. The DPOR needs to keep the copy as a best practice of the RFI log provided by the GC, submittals, any log. And of course, the TIO needs to be managed by the DPOR as well. Code reference are in the slides, so you can see where is all the reference for the changing log, for the TIO. Here are the reference.
Yeah, the design professional of record has a lot of responsibilities in the field, reviewing IOR daily reports, reviewing the status of special inspection reports, going to the job site, walking the job site, making observation reports that they leave to be a part of the project record, approving special inspectors and approving the approved agency. Confirming construction is matching what the intent of their design and what was approved. Remember, reasonable diligence to obtain personal knowledge is everybody's responsibility who's involved in these projects. Part of that means reviewing the status of all the required documentation, the project documentation, special inspector qualifications, TIO maintenance, directive change orders, change log, supporting documents, verified compliance reports, submittal documentation, shop drawings, and the ACDs, architect and engineer record observation reports. We mentioned oils list, general contractor's quality control plan program, notice of non-compliance log that the IOR would normally keep up and maintain, special inspector reports, as I mentioned, test reports that may come from the laboratory, and the identification of any seeming errors brought to the attention by the IOR.
So during construction also what happens? There are submittals, can be the first submittals where the DPOR needs to review, sign, and stamp and get the OSHPD approval, but there are also shop drawings and other type of submittals that they are reviewed only by the DPOR.
Yep, submittals are key, and depending on the nature of the submittal, there are some submittals that are obviously carry a lot of weight and there's a lot of expense associated. So make sure that you keep track of those submittals, make sure they're properly processed. They're not documents that OSHPD uses for plan review. They're not what to be built by, but I think the reality of it is that it's an important tool to use for the construction process that needs to be properly managed.
And so now we have the last of the three big overall picture of the construction, the end. So the end of the construction, the DPOR cannot think it's over because there might be the oil, the deviation, all needs to be cleared in order to be signed, the TIO, and issue all the final VCR. So like Joe already mentioned, the oil list, that one needs to be cleared up as soon as possible, because if you will wait the end of the construction of the project, then it will take even longer to close out the project. So get cleared up as fast as you can. Punch list is also needs to be cleared as well. And then for real, there is the closeout of the project. It seems a lot, but it is all in different phase of the project. And so don't forget that the DPOR can have delegate, can have alternate. If you are overwhelmed, you have a team to support. It's a teamwork. One project, one team.
And I would say, if you can remember to start the project with the end of the project in mind, and you carry that mentality all the way through, remembering the best way to close a project is when you start organizing yourselves and your teams in such a way that the end is going to be just a matter of process, because everything's going to be addressed along the way with no surprises.
So that being said, this is the end of our, probably, I don't know if we exceeded the 10 minutes today, but raise your hand if you have any question, or you can write to us at oshpod.fddicu at oshpod.ca.gov, as you can see on this slide. Cesar?
Great. Thank you, Monica. Thanks, Joe. Great job. A lot of good information and a lot of code sections that were referenced within that presentation. So again, if you haven't done so already, feel free to download the PDF version of this presentation, and you can use it, file it away, and use it when needed, and reference those code sections to the California Administrative Code and the other sections that were there. So as we stated at the beginning, if you want to participate in an open dialogue with both Joe, Monica, and the Inspection Services Unit team, feel free to raise your hand by clicking on the little hand icon next to your name, and we would gladly unmute you so you can unmute yourself, and we can have that open mic discussion. But so for now, I do see there's a hand up raised by Anthony. Anthony, if you'd like to unmute your mic, I can unmute you, and maybe you can have an open mic, or maybe you have a question or a clarifying comment. Anthony? All right. Looks like Anthony is not there. So again, want to go ahead and invite, whether it's maybe a Mickey or a Mike or Robert, anybody else want to raise your hand and have a comment towards the presentation, or maybe you want to share an experience that you have. Missy, I see you have your hand raised, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you can unmute yourself. Missy?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Missy Mirkovsky and I'm an architect. I have a question for you, and I'm not sure if this is part of the topic. I wanted to find out, like, if you can give us explanation. What is the difference between ACD, ASI, and field change?
So ACD is a material change. And I don't know if you have the code available in front of you, and I can guide on the 7-153 if I'm not wrong. So there are two different type of change. One that is material change, which is the ACD, and then there is no material change, which you as an architect, you will issue an ASI. And so both are needed to be signed and stamped, and per code, you need to keep a log of this change. And both of them, they need to have the Delta, cloud, everything. And OSHPOD quickly will review the log of the non-material change, for example, because what happens is your knowledge, your responsibility to determine, oh, this is no material change. So you move forward, therefore the construction can continue, right? Because it doesn't need to have approval from OSHPOD. But suppose that OSHPOD is looking this log and says, this no material change in the reality is a material change. So that documentation automatically needs to be changed into a change order, ACD, and requires OSHPOD approval. Any change anyway, material change or no material change, is something that is updated in your construction document. And this is why they need to be always updated in the package of the construction document, be clouded, Delta, in order to keep track on everything. It can be a follow-up from another file of a field condition, anything.
Okay. How long is the process by OSHPOD to review ACD?
Which is the process to review ACD.
How long is that? How long it takes?
It depends during construction. So usually you need to talk to the compliance officer, and there can be, if it is urgent to have the change order to be reviewed in the form of the change order, there is basically to have a rapid review of the change order. So you need to start to warn the field staff of the importance to have the change order to be reviewed as fast as possible. Otherwise, we'll go through the normal round, which is, I don't remember. James, do you remember which is the time for review for change orders?
Sorry, let me mute myself now. So yeah, like Monica stated, it depends on what is the change. At times, it is a complete redesign, right? And although field staff will want to or like to assist you, but our first priority is to observe the work of constructions. So we will probably unlikely to assist you on review of that amended construction document and will refer back to the office. And since you are the AOR, if you are a project participant and you have that pin to upload documents to our ESP, as soon as you upload an ACD, it will, automatically send you a notification on the anticipated target date of the approval. So you can use that as the base of the approval. And if it's on critical path for the project or construction, when you submit that ACD, there's a checkbox and say CPER, which means critical path expedited review request. And if you check that box, make sure you send an email to, let's say, the field staff. If it's compliance officer related items, send he or she that email for he or she to confirm that it meet that keeper request, and then the office plan review supervisor will assign that task to the individual that will be able to assist you and conduct the expedite review. If not, it will be in the queue, and at times it might take 1 month or longer for the ACD to be approved.
Okay.
So
That's very
please
helpful.
communicate
So
with
yeah,
us.
so at times, it's like 30 minutes, but at times it could be weeks. So, depends on what is the change.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Missy. Yosef, I see you have your hand up. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so you can unmute yourself, Yusuf.
Hey, Caesar, do you hear me?
We can hear you, Yusuf. Go ahead.
Thank you for the time. I just have a quick question. The form of the ACD that uploaded to the Ashbot, does it have, like, say that we are adding a detail? Should we add the detail to the existing sheet, or just by sending a sheet with all the stamps that required is enough, considering that an ACD?
To clarify, to help Oshpod to review in the simple and fast way, the more you provide, the better it is. So you could have, for example, the page where you're going to add the detail as for reference to say, here is where I'm going to add the other detail, because suppose you already completed, you have already filled up the page. You cannot say, here, I'm adding more details in that page. No, so you at least give the page where you want to add the detail as for reference to say, this is where I want to add, and then you will have your sketch for your change order for your detail. And of course, one advice, if I may, always complete a narrative. Explain why you're doing the additional detail. The better you explain in the narrative, the faster is the review as well.
Yeah, and let me interject, Yosef, is required to cloud the change, because whatever is not clouded, Archpod assume that it was previously approved, and we only review what is clouded, which means those are the changes. So if you are adding that one detail only to that sheet, then that detail should be clouded, and usually the designer, the DPOR, has their own tracking system. So the first change will be Delta 1, and then they put it on the, the title block. Delta 1 is, let's say change order 2 or something. And then the narrative should say this detail is for such and such. And then if that detail was, a change to an existing detail, then what we would like the DPOR to do is submit, that original detail that was approved as reference. And that will, kind of assist us to review the change.
In addition, always cloud and delta the change order detail or whatever you're going to change, as well as the no material change, cloud and delta.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Well, I do want to remind everyone we are at time, and it is actually a minute past the half an hour, so the 30 minutes. So we do want to invite everyone else to who is on the call still to hang with us and enjoy the open mic conversation. We do see one more hand up, so if you have more questions, or feel free to raise your hand, or if you don't want to raise your hand and have an open mic discussion, feel free to email us at that email address you see on the screen. So we are at time, but we do have a hand raised by Robert. Robert, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, Robert. Go ahead.
I appreciate your consideration, especially in the essence of the time available. But in a previous webinar, I made an inquiry as to the processing of non-material alterations and material alterations. And I remember or recall, or I thought, that the explanation given that in each case, and of course, the one difference requiring the ACD, approved construction document, for the material changes. Another difference was there was to be provided a synopsis of the nature and extent of the non-material changes. But in either case, there would have to be an approval, and I recall the words may not be verbatim, that would have to be approved and stamped by OSHPD. So to kind of lead into my question at this time, the architect who called in and asked the difference between the ACI, as I recall, is an architect's supplemental information document, and that of an ACD, which of course is an approved change order, if you would, construction document. I thought the ACI, unless I misunderstood the response given to her inquiry, it could only be and was only always limited to the architectural plans. And the ACI and part of its purpose was only for minor changes in the architectural work to be accomplished. Am I misunderstanding? And has there been a change to the document, the ASI, where it's actually become a method or vehicle with which changes, whether materially altered or non-materially altered, can be approved by OSHPD?
So, Robert, thank you again for your question. So back to the code, the 7153 is about all type of change to the approved construction document. And for all type of change can be ACD, like can be a no material change. So when we say ACD is amended construction document, and that is material change. The non-material change is also in the 7-153 section B. And there is for non-material change of the work. Now, when you say ACI, in the reality is ASI, additional supplemental information, and is when the architect issues is called ASI. And we continue to say no material change work because the no material change work could be for structural, mechanical, electrical, any other. Okay. So what is the difference between ACD and no material change is simple OSHPD review, the OSHPD stamp. That is the difference. The ACD, because it's changing materially, needs to be approved by OSHPD. And the DPOR has to have the log with all the information about this change. Okay.
Yes, and to be sure, I understand that. You were very clear to me when I made that inquiry at a previous webinar about your code reference of non-material and material changes. But the reason I'm asking now is because the architect whom just called in and asked about not only the time frame for the ACDs, but actually asked, I thought that was her query, was what was the difference between an ACD and an ASI? And I took it as the response that was given to that architect by your department that ACI could serve in purpose, whether, and let's just say the non-material type changes. But again, my understanding of the ACI and the purpose of that document was only to be pertinent to architectural plans and minor changes for architectural work. But am I to be corrected now that even if there are non-material changes to, as you've just recited, mechanical work, structural work, you can still use that ASI for that purpose?
This is why we don't say ASI.
Yeah, that's why. And
okay, so this is why we write ASI. The design professional write ASI, but technically ASI is for the architectural, and this is why we keep saying no material change, no material change. Is a conventional acronym, okay, but there is still the log. And is the design professional record or the project manager to be responsible to present when OSHPD comes, the field staff comes to the job site. Two main things needs to be presented just as a follow-up for whatever is going on at the job site is the change order log and the non-material change log. So the change order, of course, needs to follow that type of timing of review. For the non-material change, the OSHPD, the compliance officer, for example, starts to look all this information. Doesn't have to stamp that it is not an OSHPD review, but if it starts to be suspicious and no material change, that in the reality is a material change, OSHPD can take a look and say, no, this is an actual change order. So modify into a change order and submit and follow the process for a material change. So of course,
I got it, believe it or not. And thank you. Let me apologize first for taking up this extra time, but at the same time, thank you for the patience that you've extended me to go over the time that we have on this webinar. So
no problem.
Thanks for that clarification. I do appreciate it.
Yes, and Robert, it appears you have not read the 7153B.
No, and you're right. And I mentioned that's probably my bigger problem is I made a comment that I haven't participated in a role as an IOR for a number of years. And as such, I haven't sought out the need for the California building codes and the changes and modifications therein. So again, I want to thank you for your understanding and patience to my question. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I just kind of mentioned a few examples, and that's what this I'm reading from 7153B, which is non-material alter change. So, for example, final routing configuration of ducts, conduits, pipes, etc., where they are shown, diagrammatically on the approved plans, that is actually non-material alter change. So the designer just needs to show the final, configuration and issue the so-called ASI, which is the acronym for Architectural Supplemental Instructions. Right. And we could not keep up with the AIA, acronyms. So since the 2013 CAC, we are just going by material alter change or non-material alter change. So we kind of deviate, ourselves from the AIA acronym. So we don't use change orders, information bulletins, ASI, and all that. It's either a material alter change or non-material alter change. And when there's a material alter change, it requires amended construction documents, which it means that OSHPD review approval is required. And really, easy example is if you need a specific detail for construction and that detail is not included in the approved construction document, then it is a material alter change and an ACD is required, right? So that's the easy way that I explain to people that, a difference between, ACD and non-material alter change is when the detail is required, you don't have it, then it's an ACD. So.
Appreciate it. Thank you again.
Okay.
you're very welcome.
That's a lot of good information. Robert, as always, great questions. And thank you for clarifying that, James and Monica. We are at time. Actually, we are a little bit past the time. So we do want to go ahead and wrap up this presentation. So if you have any questions about this presentation, or if you have a question about a specific project or a specific question regarding something else, feel free to email us at the email address you see on the screen, oshpd.fddisu@oshpod.ca.gov. And if you have not looked at the calendar, we have 2 more FBA 10s coming up. One on the 16th of this month and one on the 23rd of this month. The one on the 16th is going to go over electrical equipment clearances. And the one on the 23rd, we're going to be going over construction containments, fire alarm, and fire and smoke damper testing. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to register for those presentations, those FBA 10s. A lot of good information that we shared during these brief webinar. So again, thank you for joining us. So until next time, thank you for doing your part and providing access to safe, quality healthcare environments throughout California. Until we meet again.